Hello, my name is Chuck Carmen. I'm the Executive Director of the Epilepsy Association. I welcome you to Purple Day Around the World Education Week and our session on Social Security disability income, the ins and outs, with attorney Bradley Boyd. I want to welcome you, Bradley. Thank you so much for giving your time. You're an expert in the field of Social Security disability, so thank you again for agreeing to do the session for us. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get started. Thank you so much, Brad.
Okay, Chuck. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. Great to get the word out amongst so many people. I do work with a lot of people from who have epilepsy and deal with these issues. Got a lot of things that we can talk about that are specifically directed towards people who have this type of an impairment. So let's just get started. A lot of people have a lot of what would we say misinformation, I guess, out there on the subject. So one of the early things that people talk about or ask about is, well, when do we apply for disability? And my answer to that is always as soon as possible. So let's say, for example, it's been a month and you're having seizures, you're not you're talking to your doctor, maybe you've got an appointment with a neurologist, maybe they're still not under control, but there's no clear answer as to, well, how long is this going to take? Well, the reality is that it could take quite a while. So, and since we don't know, and it could take quite a while, probably best to file a claim. The thing that people don't realize is that it doesn't hurt anything to file a claim, and you can always withdraw the claim. Just call Social Security up and say, hey, no, I'm good. We don't have to proceed it any further if you get better. So that would be number one, because, probably the reason that you need to know about that is the sooner you file a claim, the sooner you get paid. And unfortunately, the sad truth is that these claims take quite a while to get through the process. I mean, probably close to a year in most cases. If sooner the better, you want to get going on it. All right, so let's see. The next thing that people should know about is just because you're disabled and can't work doesn't mean that Social Security is going to agree with you. In no case will they just simply take our word for it. We always have to prove our case with medical evidence. And that means more than just a diagnosis. Let's say that you have a diagnosis for epilepsy. It's not something that is sufficient, because then, of course, the question is it controlled? Is it uncontrolled? If it's uncontrolled, how often are you having your seizures? Are they once a week? Are they once a month? Maybe once every 6 months? Who knows? So there's a big gray area there that needs to be ironed out, and we need to have medical opinions from your doctors to resolve a lot of this. So what do you do? Probably the first thing that I would do would be keep a symptom diary, or the neurologists often call them seizure diaries, where you record on a daily basis. You record if you have any symptoms. Maybe you just felt lightheaded. Maybe you actually had a grand mal seizure. Maybe it was a petit mal seizure. Something where you just had a few, maybe a minute or so, where you just stopped and couldn't go any further and couldn't remember what happened, but somebody around you is like, yeah, you had a seizure. And so you would write all that down and do it, because a lot of times I've noticed people forget, and they tend to they tend to underestimate how often they have seizures more than overestimate, in my opinion. And I think that's because it's kind of natural. We all want to appear like we're better and stronger and healthier than we really are. And so if you write them down consistently, if you get into the habit every day, then you're going to get a much more accurate report that you can give to your neurologist. And that's huge because it's his treatment notes that Social Security are going to take a look at. And so the more detail that we can get into those treatment notes, the better. Okay.
Brad, let me ask you a question here real quick.
Sure.
A lot of times, I'm glad you brought up that point. A lot of times I tell people your doctor never gets to see a seizure either. In this case, Social Security won't. If someone's around, maybe have them take a short video on their phone.
Yeah.
Is that worthwhile?
Excellent. Yeah, that's really good. I agree totally. We've had a few cases where they've done that, and that has made a big difference. Not so much to the judge, because that's not usually something that we're going to be able to admit into evidence, but it's terrific for the doctor to look at that because that gives him confidence in his diagnosis. You know, he's like, he can, you know, take a minute there and look at your video, and he'll be like, oh yeah, that's it. You know, and you'll be, you know, from then on, you won't have to, you know, worry about, you know, that from then on, you'll have a doctor that's on your side. So it's very important, I would say, to do that if you can remember, if you have somebody around. A lot of times though, unfortunately, we've got clients that you know, don't have people around, and that of course makes it much more difficult. So I would even recommend, if possible, you know, even if it's just on a temporary basis, you know, either having somebody move in with you or, you know, move in with somebody, just have people around so that that can happen. Try to make that happen, because that makes your case a lot better.
Sorry to interrupt you, but your point was documentation.
Oh yeah, documentation's huge. And as I said, the doctors, the more details that we can get into their records, the better those records are, and the more convincing they are to Social Security. So, all right, so let's see what else we've got here. I'm gonna take a look at my notes here for a second. What we'll end up doing eventually is sending a questionnaire to the neurologist, preferably, you know, about, you know, how often does your patient have these seizures? Can you describe them? What about work limitations? You know, is he going to need days off of work? Well, how many? Is he going to need to take unscheduled breaks? Say during the day, maybe, I don't know, you had a seizure and there's some recovery time. That postictal period may mean that you need to lie down. Might mean a lot of other possibilities. Maybe you're just really out of it and you can't focus, can't concentrate. That's very common. Which of course would probably mean that you'd end up taking the rest of the day off. So, so these limitations that we get from the doctor, of course, you know, some of that is going to be based on what you're telling the doctor about, you know, what you've been going through, because you know, obviously everybody's different. So the doctor has to, you know, to have good communication with you as a patient in order to kind of understand it from your perspective, what your limitations are. But then of course the doctor does have his own, you know, professional experience, and he can kind of give an estimate as to, yeah, well, this is very common. You know, he's going to probably need to have a day of rest because of these seizures. You know, he's going to be fatigued. He's, you know, he's going to be out of it. And so those are, you know, absolutely limitations that are going to cut across any type of job, you know. So anyway, so we'll probably end up having a form completed by your doctor. Now, what if you are unable to afford to go to a neurologist? Let's say maybe you're going to the clinic, the community clinic, and they don't have a neurologist on staff. That's here in Florida, that's very common. So they have to send you out somewhere. Okay, well, how are you going to afford that? There may be, well, maybe you can address that, Chuck. As I understand it, there are some funds available for people with epilepsy to go to doctors in their community. Is that correct?
Yes, the programs will vary around the United States internationally, but always contact your local epilepsy organization for assistance. In our case in Florida, we do have clinics and we provide services in every county in Florida for those that can't afford to see neurologists and get the MRIs and the EEGs done, Brad. But I would recommend anybody, if you are in a financial situation and can't afford that, contact your local epilepsy organization, ask them to advocate for you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I know the person, our local person here in Brevard County is great at that. She spends a lot of time working with the individual clients and does a great job. Let's see. Okay, so what about, speaking of money issues, what about a representation? One of the things, obviously, is the best case scenario is that you have an attorney that's representing you in front of the Social Security Administration. A lot of people don't understand how that works, so I thought I would take a couple minutes and kind of explain. This is all regulated by the Social Security Act. There is a specific contract that has been pre-approved by the federal government. So nearly everybody uses the same terms in their contract as to what they get paid. So what that is 25% of the back benefits that are going to be awarded to you, assuming you win. And there's a cap, it's never more than $6,000. So we will typically, my own practice is, when I meet with somebody for the first time, I'll go through the contract, make sure that they if they have any questions, that I answer it. And then we sign that, and basically, then you don't have to worry about paying for my services or whatever representative there is. That is all handled at the end of the case. Now another question, which is kind of related, is with representation. You've got attorneys, and you also have non-attorney representatives. To me, it seems obvious that if you have a choice between someone who's got the training of an attorney and one that's not an attorney, you would go with the attorney. But a lot of people aren't even aware that that is an option. They simply are approached. Sometimes it's, I don't know, one of the common ways, and it happens a lot of different ways, but one of the common ways is when someone goes to the emergency room in the hospital. Let's say they have a seizure and they end up going into the emergency room, and it's a pretty bad one. And the hospital gets involved, and they say, well, you really should file for Social Security disability. Here, we're going to give you this name of this company that works with, we refer people out to them, and they will help you do your case. And the person doesn't know any better, and so that's exactly what they do. They call those people up and get signed up with them. And it turns out that these are typically national organizations in all 50 states, and they have non-attorneys doing the work. and they don't really know your local doctors, your local situation. And so often representation is not as good. Um, and so that is something to be aware of. You can actually hire a fully legitimate, experienced attorney for the exact same amount of money that someone who is never, set foot in a law school. So
I'm so glad you I'm so glad you brought that up, Brad, because
yeah,
in the 28 years I've been involved in the epilepsy arena, and I see so many of our clients, patients, they go through the process and they're scared of calling an attorney because they say, I don't have the money.
right.
And you're saying that the fees are established by the Social Security Administration regardless, and you don't pay the money out of pocket until
Yeah.
the claim comes through.
Yep.
So you can get an attorney like you that specializes in Social Security disability law for the same.
Right. Exactly.
It's an excellent point to bring up to our audience.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for that, because I think there's so much misunderstanding there.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, one of the things that people need to remember too is that it does vary now between representatives as to when they get involved in the case. For years, for example, I was not getting involved in cases until someone got denied. And I just felt like, that was simpler. But I've over the years, I've discovered that that doesn't always work out the best. So I've changed my practice, and I'm now willing to take on a case right from the beginning and even help with the application. I think where it gets down to is that, we're talking about the general public, and some people, have no problem filling out an application and going through that process and answering the, common questions that Social Security has. But others really struggle, and then they don't follow up. They might get denied, and then, there's a 60-day deadline. Where you've got to file that appeal within 60 days. If not, you have to start all over again. So
you're saying, Brad, a lot of people, it seems to be very, very common. You're going to get a denial letter when you apply.
Right. Yeah, it's very common.
60-day window you can appeal, and you have a 60-day window to get that appeal accomplished.
Right.
Very important. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's 60 days, and there are exceptions. I wouldn't want anyone to say, if it's already been 60 days, and they may have a good reason. Maybe they were in the hospital. Maybe it's hard to say what it might be, but I'm still willing to look at that case because it may be some what we would call good cause that we would be able to show with some evidence as to why they missed their deadline. And Social Security is fairly reasonable about granting extensions of time. So, but still, that is the deadline, and we should let people know that that's the case. But also, I wanted to make sure that people understood that it does vary amongst representatives. Some representatives like to wait until they've actually the client has been denied before they get involved, because they help with the appeal. Others are willing to go and start right from the beginning. So a little bit about the process. So there's several levels. So we've got the initial claim, which we just mentioned, and that typically takes, all right, I'm going to give you the average here in Central Florida as to how long it takes. It could very well vary between jurisdictions around the country. So, but down here, typically 3-4 months is what it takes before there's a decision made. The vast majority are denied. And again, you've got 60 days in which to file your appeal. Then that appeal is called a request for reconsideration. Now, here in Florida, chances of success at that level, which is the first stage of appeal, again, are pretty low. I've seen statistics from Social Security saying roughly about 15% of cases get approved at that stage.
On the first appeal.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So now you've gotten 2 denials, and a lot of people at this point are ready to give up. And I would strongly encourage them not to, because as I've just said, this is the majority of cases will get denied several times. And then now the next stage of appeal is where you request a hearing before an administrative law judge. And that's the stage where most people get approved. But if they've already given up before then hey, they'll never get approved because they just haven't hung in there long enough to make it to the administrative law judge, right? So I totally encourage people not to give up. You got to be persistent if you're going to win a Social Security disability case. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's shocking, that percentage you just said there, Brad.
Yeah.
In the sector.
Yeah.
It's pretty typical in the first round, but I never realized it was that low in the second. And then you need a good representative like you and to go in front of that administrative law judge to present the case.
Right. Yeah. And so all the things that we talked about before, that's where all that comes into play. You want to make sure you've got good documentation. You want to make sure that you have limitations from your neurologist. All that stuff, if we've done a good job and we've prepared the case, by the point that you're in front of that administrative law judge, you'll have all that and he'll approve the case. The average is pretty good average. In my particular practice, we see about 75% of our cases get approved at that stage. So pretty good. But let's say that you didn't. Let's say that the administrative law judge denied you as well. Well, then you still have another 60 days in which to file an appeal. And then that is called a request for review by the appeals council. And this is the last level of stage of appeal within the administrative review process. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I should have turned that off. Okay, there we go. So anyway, so the appeals council, once they look at the case, and that could take upwards to a year. It's quite a long wait. Yeah, I know. And unfortunately, you can't avoid it because you got to go through the entire appeals process before I'm able to take a case into federal court, which is the next stage after that. So the appeals council, this is up in Falls Church, Virginia. And all of the appeals in the entire country go there to Falls Church. And so we're talking about tens of thousands of appeals. And I'm sure that's a very large building with a large amount of staff, but they probably do not spend a whole lot of time on any one case, right? Because just the numbers involved are probably crazy. So anyways, statistically, again, it's a very low percentage, maybe 20%, maybe if that, of cases that get approved or what we would call remanded, sent back from the appeals council. So in other words, we would send in a brief arguing to the appeals council why we thought the administrative judge made a mistake in this particular case. And the appeals council would then take a look at our arguments and agree or disagree. And if they agreed, then they would send the case back to the administrative law judge, typically the same judge, who would have another chance to look at the case and correct any mistakes that were found, and then decide the case for a second time. But again, the majority of cases at the appeals council are denied. And so at that point, you have the option of taking the case into federal court. And it's at that stage where it will often get turned around. But now I must say that, not every case is strong enough to be taken to federal court. So we're already, as an attorney, I'm already weeding out the weaker cases. I only take, good cases to federal court. But assuming that it's a good case, then I would take it. And then, there you, again, have a pretty high percentage of cases that we win. So you 75% of the cases, I would say, probably about thereabouts.
That's great, but the point you're making is don't give up.
Right, exactly.
I mean, if you apply that first time and you get a denial letter, don't quit there. You can appeal, and even if you're denied on there, you can appeal again. And if you think
Exactly.
the case is really solid, you can even go higher to the federal court.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great rundown on it. How would somebody find someone like you, though, Brad?
Okay, well,
share your information and share your number, but I know there's a national association, I believe.
Right, exactly. So, my website where you can get more information is bradleyboyd.com. So that's BRADLEYBOYD.com. And then my phone is 321-610-3998. But if you're not in the Central Florida area, somewhere further far abroad, National Organization of Social Security Claims Representatives have a lawyer referral line. So this is just a national group that helps to train people like myself. And they will refer out to their members across the country. So their number is 845-682-1881.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brad. I mean, like I said, in all my time, we get so many phone calls from people that receive a denial and they don't know where to go. We're so fortunate to have you here where we're based in Central Florida, but sharing that number for people all across the United States is going to be extremely helpful to them.
Yeah.
Brad, I thank you for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our audience right now? I mean, you've given a great rundown of what Social Security disability is, when to apply right away, don't wait, I guess in summary. 2 is document, get everything you possibly can get together. The more documentation, the seizure diary, the videos, your medical records from a physician that supports your reason to apply is extremely important. And then 3rd, I guess, is don't give up, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and one thing, going back to the documentation again. So, I keep talking about neurologists because, of course, they're probably the doctor that's most often employed when it comes to seizures. But I would throw in there a close second would be a psychologist, because there's often mental cognitive issues, loss of memory, difficulties focusing. So, I would say that probably a close second would be, going there and maybe getting some what we call cognitive testing done. That's very common and very helpful in a Social Security case.
So thanks for bringing that one up. I've said to people when I'm talking about epilepsy, I said the social implications sometimes are more serious than dealing just with the medical. And as you said, the depression that can go along.
Oh, yeah.
But the cognitive issues, get a good neuropsychologist to do an exam and testing to go along with your documentation. Excellent point, Brad. I'm glad you brought that one up.
Yeah, no problem. So I think that covers it, Chuck. Do you have any questions for me?
No, you always do such a great job.
Okay.
And I want to thank you again, Attorney Bradley Boyd with Bradley Boyd Law, given his time to do this presentation on the Social Security disability process. So Brad, thank you again for everything. We wish you the very, very best. So everybody,
Take care.
have a great
Bye-bye.
day. Thanks for joining us.